So there you are on a deserted island, stranded with your trusty companion, Wilson? No, it is not a volleyball that you decided to give the name of your neighbor. It's your trusty companion. You followed rule number 9. You always carried a knife. Your plane crashed in the ocean. You're the only survivor. And the only thing you have on you is your knife because TSA decided to let you through. I know, not plausible, but it could happen. And here on this channel, we don't only do knife reviews. We ask the important questions. I'm Rollshambo, and today we're going to talk about which Spyderco you should have if you were to find yourself stranded on a deserted island. So right about now, you might be asking a couple questions. First question most likely being, why Spydercos and why these Spydercos? Why are these the options? Well, the quick and dirty answer is that these are the Spydercos that I own. I know a fair amount of you might be saying, dude, if I'm stuck on an island, I want a paramilitary 2 or possibly a paramilitary, or screw that, I just want a fixed blade. But hear me out. First reason why these Spydercos is quite simple. These are the Spydercos that I own. So these are the ones that I'm most knowledgeable about. These are the ones that I have experience carrying, so on and so forth. The second reason is going to be that Spyderco is one of the most popular carry knives out there, period. So these are a very heavily carried option. Now, each one of these has their own pros and cons in our island test, but let's talk about it. First and foremost, we have the Spyderco Smock. And keep in mind, the scenario is that your plane crashes, you're somewhere in the ocean, and at the end of it all you have is a pocket knife on you. Would it be better to have a fixed blade? Absolutely. But, try getting that past TSA. They might allow a pocket knife, probably not anymore these days after 9/11, but you're more likely to get a pocket knife through with your luggage than you would a fixed blade. And so most likely, if you are in this scenario, that's what you'll have. You'll have a pocket knife. So let's talk about it. From left to right, this is the Spyderco Smock. We're looking at about just shy of 3.5-inch blade. Sheep's foot Warncliffe style. It's got a hollow ground edge, a decently thick spine that doesn't really start tapering off until you get to that very tip point. This one features a compression lock, and it's a button style compression lock, but it's not really based off springs. It's based off the tension of the liner. We're looking at carbon fiber peel ply over G10 and S30V steel. Next up, we've got the Spyderco Yojimbo 2. Now this one is one that I do carry quite a bit. This one has been modified. It's got titanium handle scales, titanium pocket clip. It's got a wave feature that would be utterly useless in a survival situation. It is a straight up Warncliffe blade designed by Michael Janich, who is a self-defense instructor. And it starts off nice and thick, but then it gets very, very thin towards the edge, towards the tip, which is primarily meant for self-defense. It'll kill your Amazon boxes just fine, but this is the second option. The third option is your Spyderco Manix 2. We're talking S30V steel. It's got the tried and true ball lock. This lock is based off a ball bearing and is known to be one of the most, if not the most, sturdy lock that Spyderco makes. There are tests that you can watch on YouTube where they test out just how strong these locks are, and by far and away, this is one of the strongest locking mechanisms you can get, if not the strongest, specifically on a Spyderco. So this one you're looking at about 3.5 inches of blade, flat ground blade, starts nice and thick. It does taper down, but it keeps that thickness for a pretty long time. And on top of that, we're looking at G10 handle scales, which are nice and grippy, a good amount of heft, good ergonomics, so on and so forth. And then finally, we've got the Ephemeral Spyderco Para 3. Again, another one that I heavily modified. I've got, colored deep carry pocket clip, titanium, matching titanium hardware, wave feature, which is, again, in this situation, utterly useless. But there is a fair amount of titanium on here, which means that it would be rust resistant. And this specific one has S45VN. Let's talk about some of the pros and cons here, and then I'll get around to which one I would want if I was stuck on a deserted island for a year. Saying that I survived that long, maybe my knife has something to do with it. Yeah, which one would I want? Well, honestly, the pros to the Smock is going to be that it stays the thickest the longest. And the reason why you'd want a nice thick blade stock when you're in a survival situation is that you might need this knife to last quite a while. You might need to do some heavy cutting with this where you're not cutting into Amazon boxes. Remember, you're on an island. You're cutting into things like sticks, trees, branches, your feather sticking to help try to build a fire, even though we don't know if you even have the means to. I haven't talked about the island too much. So that's the strong part is that you have a nice, consistent blade stock thickness. That being said, there's not a whole lot of belly on here. So let's say that you were to trap an animal. Maybe you were to strike down a bird and you're trying to survive. How well would this do skinning? I think it would do all right if you were trying to process an animal with this. I do like more curvature in the belly of the blade for things like skinning and processing. This is going to be a bit better for things like, your everyday utilities. Your destroying of boxes, your opening of letters, your chopping of apples. And so, for things like that, that's going to be really, really great. But as far as, processing an animal, it might be kind of mediocre. Now, it does also have a hollow ground blade, which helps it get nice and thin behind the edge, which is fine, except when we're talking about hard use scenarios, what we don't want is to have that edge become compromised. And so I'm not necessarily sure if I'd rather have a hollow ground blade if I'm in a survival situation. Next up, we've got the Yojimbo 2. Again, S30V on this blade steel. And this one is also a hollow ground blade. And this one suffers some of the same issues and a few more. This one has a nice bit of heft to it. And, you lose this wave feature and you have a nice place to put your thumb behind it to get some extra control on the blade. But as far as a self-defense scenario goes, it's a deserted island. You're not really going to need to defend yourself. And I'm sure if Michael Janich was in that position, he would probably design a different blade for those purposes. You can tell that this is self-defense oriented because of how that blade stock goes from thick to needle thin. This is meant for piercing, for puncturing. It's going to make a hell of a knife if you're cutting down boxes, opening letters, so on and so forth. Self-defense / utility. So keep that in mind. Next, we've got the Manix 2, and this is where things really start to get interesting. This is one of those knives that doesn't really hang its hat on the fidget factor. And maybe being able to fidget with your knife is important if you're stuck in a survival situation on an abandoned island. Because let's face it, you're probably going to get bored while you're busy surviving. That does come into play. I don't want us to completely forget fidget factor because, you know what, being able to keep yourself entertained and keep away the boredom, that's going to be part of it. Can you fidget with this? Absolutely, but it's not going to be as strong of a fidget monster as, say, the Spyderco Smock or the Spyderco Para 3. What you do get on here is S30V steel, and you get a blade that's flat ground, which means that it's not necessarily as thin behind the edge. It does taper quite a bit, but you're going to have better structure for those harder use case scenarios. As far as the thickness on the blade stock, let's see if we can get up there nice and close. This isn't the thickest out of the four, but it does have the least amount of taper. So that means that it's got really good structure all the way to the tip. There's a good amount of belly on here, but nothing too extreme. This is something you could definitely process an animal with and still be able to do puncture-y type things with it. The G10 is going to offer a great amount of grip, and if there's any rain on your deserted island, this might be a good one to have with you. I mean, the good news is no one will be there to look at this hideous pocket clip that I still haven't replaced. But I promise you, I'm getting there. And then finally, we've got probably my most carried Spyderco of all time. This is the Spyderco Para 3 that's been heavily modified, and I know there's going to be some people out there grumbling that I turned this into a gas station knife and I should be ashamed of myself for visiting the titanium gas station to go ahead and modify my knife. Well, guess what? I'm not sorry, and I'm not apologizing for it because I like it. My money, my knife, deal with it. So here we go. This one is a bit of a conundrum for me. We again have the compression lock. In fact, all of these except for the Manix 2 have the compression lock. This one is going to start off nice and thick at the top of the spine of the blade, and then it tapers down. It does taper down to a pointier tip a lot faster than the Manix 2, but it also starts off a lot thicker. It also has a more aggressive belly, which means that if you're going to do something like process an animal with it, whether you're filleting a fish, gutting a bird, so on and so forth, and yes, if you're in a survival situation, even if you're someone that doesn't like the idea of doing that, you'd probably do it if it meant that you could survive. So it does have merit. This specific one has titanium handle scales, so let's talk about it as if this would be the one that I would have with me. That titanium would be really nice because it means that even if I get some salt water on it, it's not going to corrode as much. S45VN steel as well is a very well rounded off steel. It's not too terribly hard to sharpen, but it is going to keep an edge fairly well. And it's going to be nice and slicey for the duration. That flat grind on the blade is also something that I think I'd rather prefer. So yeah, the lock is a good compression lock, but it's not going to be as sturdy as the Manix 2. So I'm going to do something right now. I'm going to go ahead and eliminate one of these knives entirely. Goodbye, Yojimbo 2. Michael Janich did not intend for you to be there on a deserted island. You are not my Wilson. So then there were 3. Well, let's keep talking about it. So on this one also has a blade shape, which is, it's got a lot of structure to it, but I feel like where this knife really excels is in the fidget factor. So could you use it to help keep yourself entertained while you're there watching the birds fly by on your deserted island trying to survive? Yeah, that could definitely come in handy. And it does have a little bit of belly on the blade, but it's not necessarily super pronounced. So, you know, processing animals might not be the strong suit on this one. And despite how thick and consistent that spine is, it does get rather thin behind the edge with that hollow grind. You know, something to take away from on the Spyderco Manix 2 is just exactly how heavy is this. This is probably one of the heavier options, believe it or not, even considering that I've got a titanium knife right here. Because this one is bigger, it's actually around the same weight, but it is on the heavier side. It's not as fidget friendly, which means that your Wilson will not be keeping you entertained. So yeah, loss of points there. And then finally, let's talk another round about the Spyderco Para 3. On this one, the knife, this is the shortest of blades that's left on the table. So that does need to be taken into consideration. If you do need to fight off a wild animal, or God forbid, you just need much more blade, this one might not do the trick. But then again, you know, the difference between 3 and 3.5, we're talking about a 1/2 inch between you and whatever it is that you need to kill, process, or carry. This one does suffer a little bit because it does have the shortest blade left on the table. And despite what they might tell you, gentlemen, size does matter. So it's time that we go ahead and eliminate one more from the table. Let's go ahead and eliminate this guy right here. As much as it pains me, I love this knife. The Spyderco Smock is amazing. And while it would keep you heavily entertained, I just don't necessarily have faith in both S30V and a hollow ground because I don't necessarily think that edge would hold up as well. You'd have plenty of spine left, but it doesn't make any difference if your edge is gone. So goodbye, Spyderco Smock. All right. Now, I've already gone over the pros and cons of both of these knives. So at this point in time, I'd like your vote. Came down to either the Spyderco Para 3 or the Spyderco Manix 2. Which one would you rather have with you on your deserted island? Which one would be your Wilson? I can tell you right now exactly which one it would be, and I'm going to go ahead and eliminate the Spyderco Para 3. Now, you might be thinking, what the crap, man? You're all about that Spyderco Para 3. You took that modification to the max. Why are you eliminating it? Well, because if I am being serious about a survival situation, I want a blade that's going to be longer. I want that consistent spine all the way to the tip, and I want that flat ground edge. It's going to be easier to sharpen over time. This one has enough belly to get it all done while not necessarily being too much. On top of that, it also has the strongest lock. If I can't have a fixed blade, I want my locking mechanism to be the best that it can be. So for those reasons, and for those reasons alone, I hope to God that if I am ever in a plane crash in the ocean and I get stuck on a deserted island, that I get stuck there with this. Guys, that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed watching something a little bit different than what I normally do. If you watched this far, make sure that you consider giving this video a like. If you want to see more content like this, maybe you want to see more knife reviews, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. And if you're interested in free knives, I will be giving away one of these Finch Knife Co. knives. I've got the currently unreleased Buffalo Tooth. I've got the ever popular Model 1929. And then as well, I've also got the Orion Knives Scorpio. When I hit 500 subscribers, we'll do a giveaway, and whoever wins will be able to take their pick which one of these they would like, and I will send it to them for free. So if you want to see me hit that goal, make sure you smash that subscribe button. And guys, I will see you on the flip side.